There is something deeply unsettling about the moment you realize that a person you trusted was never who they said they were. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly, quietly, like a chill that settles into a room before you even notice the window is open. One small thing feels slightly off. Then another. And another. And before you fully understand what is happening, you are standing in the middle of a situation that you never should have walked into in the first place. We live in a world where so much of our daily lives now happens through a screen. We buy things online, we find services online, we meet people online. And for the most part, most of us have learned to navigate that world with at least some level of caution. But every now and then, someone is caught off guard. Every now and then, someone puts just a little too much trust in a stranger who had very specific and very disturbing reasons for wanting to be trusted in the first place. The stories you are about to hear tonight are not made up. They are not dramatized for effect. They are real experiences shared by real people who, at different points in their lives, came face to face with danger that was hiding behind the ordinary. A simple housing arrangement. A casual home cleaning service. A cheap second-hand couch for sale. None of these things sound frightening on their own, do they? That is exactly the point. The most dangerous traps in the world rarely look like traps from the outside. They look like opportunities. They look like good luck. They look like exactly what you needed at exactly the right moment. Tonight, we are going to walk through 3 separate accounts, 3 very different people, 3 very different situations, all connected by a single thread. Every single one of these encounters started with a listing on Craigslist. And every single one of them took a turn that nobody could have fully anticipated. These are the kinds of stories that stay with you. The kind that make you think twice the next time something feels almost too convenient, almost too easy, almost too perfect to be real. If you are joining us for the first time tonight, welcome. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We share these accounts regularly, and trust me, you are going to want to be here. For those of you who have been with us for a while, thank you so much for coming back. We are so glad you are here with us tonight. Now, get comfortable. Pour yourself something warm. And please, keep the lights on. Let's begin. Story 1, The Craigslist Housing AD. The person who shared this first story has asked to remain anonymous, and honestly, once you hear everything, you will completely understand why. This is not an easy thing to admit publicly. It involves choices that, looking back, she would do very differently. But she shared it because she wants others, especially young women, to hear it. And sometimes the most valuable stories are the ones that cost the most to tell. It was the year 2017. She was 21 years old. And she was, by her own honest description, going through what she calls her attitude era. She had dropped out of college after her very first year. Her relationship with both of her parents had completely fallen apart. Her relationship with her sister was no better. The handful of friends she had were the only real anchors she had left in her life. And her job, a position at a local vape shop, was about as far from fulfilling as a job could possibly be. She was showing up, standing behind a counter, counting down the hours, and coming home to a house where she felt like a stranger in her own family. She was not in a good place. And when you are not in a good place, something interesting happens to your judgment. The things that might raise a red flag for someone who feels safe and settled in their life suddenly start looking a lot more like doorways to something better. Desperation has a way of making even questionable decisions feel completely reasonable. That was the state of mind she was in when she came across a posting on Craigslist from a man who called himself Jackson. The ad was advertising free housing. Not cheap housing. Not discounted housing. Free. All a person would need to do is look after his home, keep it clean, and occasionally cook a meal here and there. No children involved. Basically an au pair arrangement, but without any childcare responsibilities. And attached to the listing were about 10 photographs of the house itself. It looked like a perfectly modest, slightly old-fashioned middle-class home. Nothing fancy. Nothing flashy. But the pictures genuinely appealed to her. Still, it was not the pictures that grabbed her attention the most. It was the words. Free living. No background check required. She did not tell her parents about it. She did not ask her friends what they thought. She just replied. If you have ever been in a situation like this, where something inside you just pushed forward without stopping to ask the right questions, drop a comment below. Sometimes our instincts push us forward when we should be stepping back, and we have all been there in one way or another. Jackson responded within just a few minutes of her reaching out. She asked the basic, natural questions you would ask about something like this, and he had a smooth, confident answer for every single one of them. But there was something she noticed fairly early in their exchange. He asked her what her gender was. When she answered that she was female, his replies seemed to get noticeably longer. More detailed. More engaged. She told herself it was nothing. Plenty of people prefer to have a woman as a housekeeper or caretaker. It was a reasonable explanation, and she wanted it to be true. He told her he was away from home most of the day during the week, but he expected to come home to a tidy house. He also mentioned he would not mind if she occasionally had a hot meal ready for him after work. She thought about it for a moment and decided she was completely fine with all of that. Free housing was free housing. She would cook every night if it meant getting out of her parents' house and away from that vape shop. He also said he would cover the groceries. It was sounding almost impossibly good. He invited her to come see the house that very afternoon to decide if it felt like a good fit. She said yes. A few hours later, she was driving her beat-up little Civic across town to the address he had given her. The neighborhood looked perfectly normal. Quiet streets. Neighboring homes with little flowers and decorations out front. The kinds of details that tell you ordinary families live there. She felt encouraged. When she rang the bell and the door opened, the man standing in the doorway was not quite what she had pictured. She had imagined something like a regular, middle-aged dad type, maybe 45 years old, totally unremarkable. Instead, the man in front of her was closer to 60. He stood about 6 feet tall, had a gray beard, and carried a bit of extra weight. But he greeted her immediately with a wide smile, and before she even had time to react, he pulled her in for a hug. They had just met. But somehow the warmth and ease of his manner actually put her at ease. He gave her a tour. Downstairs was a standard layout, kitchen, dining room, living room. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms and a single bathroom. He only showed her the guest room she would be using and the shared bathroom. The other doors stayed firmly closed. He mentioned one room across the hall was an office she could use if she ever needed to. Down the hallway was his bedroom and one other room that he never explained at all. He also told her there was a basement, unfinished, used only for his workout equipment and laundry. And that was that. Tour complete. He never once showed her the backyard. She told him she wanted the arrangement. He told her she had the job. 2 days later, she came back with her bags. She told her parents she had found an apartment. She gave them no further details. She did not feel like she owed them any. The first night in the house, she noticed the cameras. They were not hidden, exactly. They were small, black cameras mounted up in the corners, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. She told herself it made complete sense. The man was letting a total stranger live inside his home. Of course he would want some kind of security system in place. But she still wished he had mentioned them beforehand. For the first time since the whole arrangement began, she felt a small, quiet flicker of something uncomfortable. That night, lying in bed trying to sleep, she started hearing things she had not noticed during the daytime visit. The old wooden floors would creak from time to time. At one point, she was almost certain she heard the distinct sound of a door closing somewhere on the floor below. She checked her phone. It was past 1:30 in the morning. She talked herself out of it. Old houses make sounds. When you are lying in silence in an unfamiliar place, you hear every single thing the building does. She closed her eyes and eventually drifted off. The next morning he was already gone before she woke up, exactly as he had said he would be. He had left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter with a list of tasks: laundry, vacuuming, wiping down the surfaces. Normal household chores. She got through everything methodically and then went back upstairs to settle into her room, unpacking her clothes and her laptop and setting up a few personal items to make the space feel like it actually belonged to her for a little while. She remembers thinking to herself, quietly and with a little bit of surprise, maybe this could actually work out. The first full week was genuinely peaceful. When he got home in the evenings, they would sit and exchange small talk. Nothing deep, nothing unusual, where she grew up, what she thought she wanted to do with her life, that kind of thing. She cooked dinner several nights in a row and he seemed genuinely appreciative. She started wondering if the discomfort she had felt at the beginning was just her own anxiety playing tricks on her. Then came the night she made pasta with chicken and vegetables. She had tried her best, but she was the first to admit she had no real cooking background. She was a 21-year-old who had been living on convenience food and vending machine snacks. When he came home that evening, he looked exhausted and irritable before he even sat down. He took one bite. His entire expression shifted. He said it tasted bland. She offered immediately to season it more or start something entirely different, but before she could finish the sentence, something changed in him. His voice took on a sharp, cold edge she had never heard from him before. He told her that if she was going to live in his home for free, the very least she could do was learn to cook something worth eating. He pushed the plate away. He stood up. He told her to clean up the mess she had made in his kitchen. Then he walked to his room and shut the door behind him. The speed of it shook her. It was not just the words, it was how instantly his entire personality seemed to flip. Up until that moment, he had been consistently warm and easygoing. And then, just like that, he was not. She cleaned the kitchen quietly and told herself he had probably just had a bad day at work. The next morning, she apologized to him. Even though she did not feel she had done anything truly wrong, she wanted to keep the peace and smooth things over. She told him she was sorry about dinner and that she would do better. He laughed it off like the whole thing had never happened. And then he said something that stopped her cold. He suggested that maybe she could make it up to him by doing her cleaning duties that day in nothing but her underwear. He said it with a smile. Like it was a light-hearted joke between friends. She froze. She told him, as calmly as she could manage, that she was not comfortable with that. He laughed again, told her to relax, said he was only joking, and went to bed. She stood there in the kitchen alone after he walked away, and something had shifted permanently inside her. This was no longer just someone having a bad day. Something was genuinely wrong with this man. That evening, she texted one of her closest friends and told her everything, the living situation, the comments he had made, all of it. Her friend's response was immediate and blunt. She told her she was out of her mind for still being there and that she needed to leave as fast as she possibly could. But she did not want to go. As strange and as uncomfortable as things had started to get, she still felt more in control of her own life inside that house than she ever did back at her parents' place. Going home meant admitting failure. And at 21, that felt worse than almost anything else. About a week later, she was on her way out of the house to buy groceries with money he had left for her, when something unexpected happened. A car behind her started laying on the horn. Not briefly, persistently, following her down the street. She started to feel genuinely scared that something was wrong with her car, or with her driving. She pulled over. The car pulled up right behind her, and a young woman, close to her own age, stepped out and walked directly to her window. The woman asked her point blank if she was living at that house. When she said yes, the young woman told her she needed to get away from that man as quickly as she could. It turned out that Jackson was not even his real name. And this young woman standing at her car window? She was the girl who had been in the exact same arrangement before her. The same ad. The same setup. The same house. She told her that she had eventually become aware that he had cameras watching her not just in the common areas, but in places she would never have expected. She said he would casually mention things to her, details about her day, her habits, her movements, things he should have had no way of knowing unless he had been watching her constantly. She said that when she tried to leave, he made it feel almost impossible. He would ask endless questions whenever she tried to go anywhere, where she was going, when she would be back, who she was with. And then the young woman told her the worst part. One night, she had woken up. And she saw him walking out of her bedroom. The girl sitting in the car felt physically sick hearing those words. The young woman then told her one more thing that completely rearranged everything she thought she understood about the situation. She said that he did not actually have a job. He was not going to work each day. He had been lying about it. And she believed, based on everything she had experienced, that he was actually still somewhere inside the house most days. She sat in her car trying to absorb all of it. Every strange sound. Every creaking floorboard in the middle of the night. Every door she thought she had imagined closing. It was all suddenly making a very different kind of sense. She asked the young woman how she could leave without making things dangerous. The advice she received was steady and specific. Act completely normal. Do not change your behavior in any noticeable way. Start slowly removing your most important belongings, a few things at a time, tucked quietly into your car during ordinary trips out of the house. When you leave for the last time, make it look like you are simply running an errand. Do not confront him. Do not let him see that you know anything at all. After the young woman drove away, she sat alone in her car for several minutes before she felt ready to go back inside. And when she walked through that front door, the house felt entirely different. Every room. Every corner. Every shadow. She felt watched in a way that had gone from uncomfortable to something much more frightening. That night, she did what the young woman had told her and searched her room carefully. It did not take long. Near the top of the closet shelf, pushed back into a corner behind a box, she found it. A tiny black lens, barely visible, pointing out through a small hole that had been deliberately drilled through the wood. She moved the box back slowly, exactly as she had found it. She lay down on her bed. And she did not sleep a single minute. She stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought about every decision that had brought her here. She was still awake at whatever strange hour it was when she heard her bedroom door slowly creak open. She turned over and looked directly at it. He was standing in the doorway. He noticed her looking at him. He apologized for disturbing her. He closed the door. She did not move for a very long time after that. The next morning, she began her exit plan. Each day, she carried one small, unremarkable bag of belongings out to her car. She kept her behavior completely normal. She smiled. She cleaned. She said good morning. 3 days later, while he was supposedly at work, though she now understood she had no way of knowing where he actually was, she walked out of the house for the last time and drove away without looking back. He texted her later that day asking where she was. She replied once, telling him she had decided to go back home and that she was grateful for the opportunity. He responded immediately asking why, insisting she should come back and at least talk to him in person. She never replied again. About a week after that, she received an email notification. Someone had attempted to log into one of her old online accounts. The login attempt had originated from the same town where his house was located. She changed every password she had immediately. She still does not know what his real intentions were. But she believes, with everything she experienced, that if she had stayed any longer, she would have found out. If you are ever browsing online and come across an offer for free housing from a private individual, no background check, no formal agreement, just a stranger's generosity, please remember this story. Nothing offered freely by a stranger online is ever truly free. There is always a cost. And sometimes, that cost is something you cannot afford to pay. If this story made you feel something, go ahead and hit the like button. It really does help more people find these stories and stay safe. And if you have ever found yourself in a situation that felt wrong but you could not quite explain why, share it in the comments. You are not alone, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear tonight. Story 2, The House Cleaner. Our second story tonight comes from a man who lives alone in a 2-story house, a place he describes as modest, a little more space than he really needs, bought a couple of years ago. He works long hours. He is on his own most of the time. And somewhere along the way, keeping up with the house had started to slip away from him. He kept telling himself he would get to it. Every weekend he would think about it. And every weekend it just did not happen. He had good intentions and a genuinely full schedule, and the cleaning always ended up at the very bottom of the list. One evening after work, sitting on the couch and scrolling through listings online, he came across what looked like a simple, no-fuss solution. An independent house cleaner advertising their services on Craigslist. Cash only. Flexible scheduling. Nothing complicated. He figured, why not? This was exactly the kind of thing he needed. He sent an email that night. She responded the following morning. She told him she typically worked with apartment clients but was happy to take on houses as well. They made arrangements for her to come by during one of his workdays so she could get started while he was out. She asked a few completely routine questions. How large was the house? Were there any pets? Did he live alone? He answered all of them directly, including that last one. He mentioned, almost in passing, that he lived by himself. He admits now, looking back, that he wishes he had been a little more careful about volunteering that particular detail so casually. She arrived the following Thursday. He was home just long enough to meet her quickly before heading out to work. She appeared to be in her late 30s or thereabouts. She was quiet. Reserved. She did not make much eye contact, but he assumed she was simply on the shy side. He walked her through the house, upstairs, downstairs, all the rooms that needed attention. He told her his office was off limits and did not need cleaning. She asked where the cleaning supplies were kept and he pointed her to the laundry room. Before he left, she asked what time he generally returned from work. He told her he was usually home around 6 in the evening, sometimes closer to 7 depending on traffic. At the time, that seemed like a completely logical question for someone who wanted to be finished and out before her client arrived home. When he got back that evening, the house looked genuinely wonderful. Everything was clean and organized, the floors were bright, the countertops gleamed, and the whole place smelled of fresh cleaning products. He paid her exactly what they had agreed, she left, and everything seemed perfectly fine. For about a week, nothing was unusual. Then, approximately 6 nights after that first cleaning, he woke up in the middle of the night, somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. He was not a particularly deep sleeper, so waking up at that hour was not unusual for him in itself. What stopped him was a soft, dull thump from somewhere below him. He lay there for a moment. It sounded like something settling, the way old houses expand and contract, the way furniture shifts slightly in the quiet. He closed his eyes and went back to sleep. A couple of nights later, the same thing. This time it sounded more specifically like a cabinet door swinging shut somewhere in the kitchen. Once again, he reasoned with himself. He was probably half asleep and imagining things. He was not about to wander around a dark house at 3 in the morning chasing a noise that was probably nothing. Over the following week, small oddities began accumulating. A kitchen cabinet he found slightly open one morning, he figured he must have left it that way. A dining chair pulled a few inches out from the table, probably his own doing, unremembered. One Saturday morning, he noticed that the hand towel hanging in the downstairs bathroom was noticeably damp. He had not used that bathroom recently. Each of these things had a reasonable enough explanation on its own. That is what made them so easy to dismiss. It is only when you lay them all alongside each other that the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The nighttime sounds continued with a quiet regularity. He started shutting his bedroom door at night instead of leaving it open the way he usually did. He would not quite admit to himself why. The unease was building gradually, like water slowly rising in a room without a visible source. One night, he woke up convinced he could hear movement directly outside his bedroom door. Not settling wood. Not a distant sound from another part of the house. Pressure on the floor, close. Right there. He did not get up. He lay completely still and stared at his door, watching to see if the handle moved. Nothing happened. He eventually fell back asleep and told himself the next morning that he had been half dreaming. Around this time, he decided to bring the cleaner back. Overall, she had done good work, and he reasoned that his restless nights were probably just the result of stress from his job. He texted her and she agreed to come again. He left the back door unlocked, went to work, and came home to a fresh, tidy house once more. She asked if he wanted to set up a regular monthly schedule. He said maybe once a month to start. About a week after that second visit, he started noticing something he could not explain away with stress or fatigue. Food was disappearing from his kitchen faster than it should have been. He would swear to himself that he remembered having one more yogurt in the fridge from the previous night, and then it was gone. He would look at the bread and feel certain there had been more slices there the day before. Once, he found a drinking glass sitting in the sink that he was completely sure he had not used. He was living alone. He had no regular visitors. There was no reasonable explanation for any of it. He even went so far as to look up information about sleepwalking, wondering if somehow he was eating and drinking in his sleep without any memory of it. He sat with that possibility for a while and did not entirely dismiss it. Then came the night that stopped all of his rationalizing. He woke up to footsteps. Not the ambiguous sounds of a house settling or creaking. Not something that could be explained away with a good story. He heard slow, deliberate footsteps moving somewhere below him, on the ground floor of his house. He sat up in bed, grabbed his phone, and went completely still. After about 10 seconds, he heard something bump lightly into a wall. He did not go downstairs. He knows how that sounds, and he is honest about what he was feeling in that moment: fear. Real, physical fear. The kind that locks your body in place before your mind has even fully processed what is happening. He sat upright in bed for 30 minutes. Heard nothing further. Eventually convinced himself, one more time, that it had all been in his head. But in the morning, he checked every window and every door. Every single one was locked and secure. He checked the basement, though he had never heard anything from down there. Clear. A few days after that, he opened his kitchen junk drawer, the one where he kept odds and ends, batteries, take-out menus, small random items. He also kept 2 spare house keys on a ring inside that drawer. There was only one key there now. He stood in his kitchen with his hand in that drawer for a long moment, feeling the cold metal of a single key where there should have been 2. He searched the entire house. The key was simply gone. He started locking his bedroom door at night. About 4 nights later, he decided to test something. He left for work as usual in the morning. Drove several blocks down the road. Then looped back, parked his car on the street just behind his, and walked quietly back to his own house through the back door. He went upstairs. And he waited. Around 11 o'clock that morning, he heard it. The sound of his front door unlocking from the outside. Soft footsteps entered the house. He moved carefully to a position near the staircase railing where he could see part of the ground floor below without being seen himself. A woman walked in like she owned the place. She had brought no cleaning supplies. Nothing. She walked straight to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator door without the slightest hesitation, took out a drink, and sat down at his dining table. She sat there quietly for a few minutes, in the kind of stillness that suggested she had done this before. Many times before. Then she stood and walked slowly through his living room, looking at his belongings the way someone looks at a space they consider familiar. She picked up a framed photograph from a shelf, a picture of him and his brother, and simply stood there, studying it. Then she turned toward the stairs. He backed into his bedroom as quietly as he could and pulled the door shut without making a sound. His mind was moving very fast and not landing anywhere useful. He heard her footsteps on the stairs. Then they stopped. He looked at the gap beneath his door. A shadow. She was standing right outside his room. Not moving. Not speaking. Just standing there, as if she already knew exactly where he was. It felt like a full minute passed. He made his decision. He flung the door open. She was standing right there, just a foot or two away, already looking directly at the door when it opened. Already looking at him. And then he realized, it was not the same woman he had hired. This woman was different. Different build. Different hair. Different face entirely. But her expression was what stopped him cold. There was nothing soft in it. Nothing apologetic or surprised or even frightened. Just a flat, cold stare. Almost angry. Almost hateful. As if she had every reason in the world to be standing in a stranger's home and was annoyed at being interrupted. Neither of them said a word. After a few terrible seconds, she turned. Walked back down the stairs with calm, unhurried steps. He heard his front door open. And then it closed. He stood there shaking, unable to move properly for several minutes. When he finally could, he called the police. He told them everything. Both women. The missing key. The food. The nighttime sounds. Every detail he could recall. He gave them the contact number and the email address of the original cleaner. After that day, the original woman went completely silent. No responses. Nothing. He replaced every single lock in his house that same afternoon. The moment the police left, he drove straight to the hardware store. The officer's parting words stayed with him. When asked whether he had given a copy of his key to anyone else, the officer, after hearing his answer, simply said, "Sometimes people who operate this way do not work alone." He has not hired a private cleaner since. Story 3, The Craigslist Couch. This final story comes from a man who tells it from the comfortable distance of nearly 2 decades of hindsight. He wants to make that clear up front, this happened back in 2008, and yes, that does mean it was nearly 20 years ago now. But he says it has never stopped feeling recent. Some experiences plant themselves so deeply that no amount of time puts them at a comfortable distance. For anyone who was too young to remember the internet in the early 2000s, he offers a bit of context. Things were genuinely different back then. Facebook was just beginning to find its footing, but most people he knew were still on MySpace. Social media existed, but it was nothing like the all-consuming presence it has become today. And while people had certainly heard alarming stories about the dangers of the internet, most of them, himself very much included, treated those warnings with a kind of lazy, youthful dismissal. That kind of thing happens to other people. That is something that happens somewhere else. He was in his early 20s. He was reckless in the cheerful, oblivious way that certain young people are reckless, not out of malice, but out of a deeply misplaced confidence that nothing truly bad could ever come find him specifically. He used phrases like, "That could never happen to me," with complete sincerity. That was before one spring evening changed everything. At the center of this story is Craigslist. He explains that today Craigslist is still technically around, but it occupies nothing like the position it held in the early 2000s. Back then, before platforms like Facebook Marketplace even existed, Craigslist was essentially the internet's marketplace for everything. Small household items. Large furniture. Vehicles. Job listings. Side work. If you needed something or wanted to sell something, Craigslist was the first and often the only place you thought to look. His personal journey onto the website began with a breakup. He had been living with his girlfriend, and one day with almost no warning, she ended the relationship and asked him to leave. He was not homeless, a close friend took him in immediately, but he was suddenly without a place of his own, working for $7 an hour and quickly discovering that finding an apartment on that income was considerably harder than he had imagined. His friend, one of Craigslist's most devoted champions, urged him to search the site for rooms or houses to rent. He was hesitant. He was not sure why exactly, but something about renting a living space from a stranger online did not sit right with him. He passed on that particular idea. However, he did start browsing for furniture. Because she had kept everything from their shared home after the breakup, and whenever he did eventually find his own place, he was going to need things to put in it. His friend had a large garage where he could store anything he found in the meantime. At first, it felt like discovering buried treasure. Deals everywhere. Items in excellent condition for almost nothing. He began to understand immediately why so many people swore by the site. One afternoon he was looking specifically for a small couch or love seat. He came across a posting from a man going by the name Keith, who was advertising a complete sectional sofa for $45. The photograph accompanying the listing showed a compact sectional in what appeared to be perfectly good shape. The price seemed almost impossible for what was being offered, but he was not asking that question. He was 20-something and he saw a great couch at a price he could afford, and that was the beginning and end of his analysis. He messaged Keith. Keith responded almost immediately. He was friendly, easy to talk to, and he had a ready explanation for the price. He had recently landed a new job in another state and was in the process of selling everything quickly before the move. It made sense. It sounded honest. They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet that evening. It is important to say here that he understands, now, all the ways that encounter had danger written into it from the very first message. He has replayed it many times over the years. But he also wants to be clear about something: when you are in the middle of a situation and your mind is focused on a simple goal, you do not see the shape of things the way you would from the outside. He was thinking about a couch. Not about risk. Not about signals. Just a couch. He pulled up to Keith's house around 9 o'clock that night. The neighborhood stopped him for just a moment. Not because anything dramatic or obviously alarming was happening, but because of the quality of the stillness there. The entire block felt desolate in a way that went beyond simply being after dark. The houses were run down and dark, not just unlit for the evening, but carrying the particular look of places that had not been properly inhabited or cared for in a long time. Street lamps were sparse. Everything had a muted, abandoned quality that went beyond ordinary quiet. He tried calling Keith's number multiple times. Each time, an automated voice told him the number was no longer in service. He was just about ready to leave, actually had his hand moving toward the gear shift, when his phone buzzed in his hand. An unfamiliar number with a different area code. He answered. The voice on the other end was deep. Slightly uneven in its rhythm, the way a voice gets when someone is working hard to sound casual. The man called him fella, apologized profusely about the phone situation, and explained that he had broken his personal phone earlier and was calling from a work cell instead. He was irritated, but not alarmed. In hindsight, he knows he should have been alarmed. But at the time, his brain was doing what brains do in these situations: it was constructing just enough of a rational story to make forward movement feel acceptable. Keith told him to come around to the back of the house, where he would unlock the back door and let him in. He did not question it for even a second. He made his way around to the back of the property. The darkness back there was even deeper than out front. He had expected the man to at least turn on a porch light or something to help him see where he was going. He got to the back door and stood there, not sure whether to knock or wait or simply step inside. He decided to call Keith's new number again. Instead of hearing the ringing through his phone, he heard a ringtone coming from behind him. Not from inside the house. From the bushes in the backyard. He said it himself, that was the first moment he felt it. That quiet, primal awareness that something was deeply wrong. Not just inconvenient. Not just unusual. Wrong. Keith came bursting out of the bushes, waving his flipping phone, that strange and uneven voice immediately launching into an explanation. He claimed he had been out back getting rid of old food. He said he liked to feed the squirrels and the other small animals that lived back there in the garden. He said he had not meant to startle him. He was sorry. He told him it was fine and that he just wanted to see the couch so he could be on his way. Keith said of course and led him cheerfully toward the back door. And then Keith seemed to have trouble opening it. This struck him as odd. When a person arranges to let someone in through the back door of their own house, you would expect them to already have it unlocked, or at the very least to be opening it from the inside. Instead, Keith was standing outside with him, struggling with the handle, apologizing for the door sticking from time to time, and asking him if he could help force it open with his shoulder. He finally got a proper look at Keith in those few moments. The limited light was not generous, but it was enough. The man was older, somewhere in his late 50s, he estimated. He was thin, almost gaunt. His white hair was pulled back in a long, unkempt ponytail. And he smelled, powerfully and unmistakably, of old cigarette smoke. He grabbed the handle. Lowered his shoulder. Pushed hard. The door did not stick. Someone opened it from the other side. The momentum he had built up carried him forward, and he lost his balance and crashed to the floor. From somewhere above him in the dark, he heard Keith's voice shout a single word. Now. Two figures emerged from opposite sides of the darkened room. Before he could understand what was happening, they had him on the ground. One of them was enormously large. He could feel it even without seeing anything clearly. He struggled, but it was useless. Keith started kicking him in the face. He said one of the worst parts of what happened next, beyond the pain, beyond the fear, was the darkness. He could not see anything. And not being able to see made every single thing feel more terrifying. He could hear the sound of tape being ripped from a roll. He did not want to think about what that meant. And then something extraordinary happened. At some point during the chaos of falling and being held down, his body had accidentally dialed his friend, the one he had been staying with since the breakup. The friend whose garage was full of furniture. And that friend, completely unaware of what was happening, was saying hello repeatedly into the phone at full volume. It was enough. He made a decision and committed to it completely. He shouted out that he was at the back of the house and told someone to come help him. He had no one with him. There was nobody outside waiting. It was a bluff, and he delivered it as convincingly as he had ever said anything in his life. The big man's grip loosened. He glanced at Keith. Keith stopped kicking. That pause, that single, brief hesitation, was everything. He wrenched himself free. Got to his feet, and ran. Out the back door. Around the side of the house. To his car. He could hear at least one of them behind him, but he did not look back. He threw himself into the driver's seat, locked the door, and got the car moving before he even had both hands on the wheel. As he pulled away, he caught one clear look at the large man for the first time. Bald. Patchy beard. Eyes that were dark in a way that went beyond the absence of light, empty in a way that nothing about them suggested mercy or hesitation. The man was pulling at the car door handle as he accelerated. He drove for hours. He could not go back to his friend's place, not yet. He was terrified they had somehow followed him and he was not going to lead them to where he was sleeping. He drove through the dark, gradually coming back to himself, before finally circling back. He called his friend. He told him everything. Later, he called the authorities. But by the time anyone could act on the information, the listing had been taken down. The phone Keith had used turned out to be a prepaid device with no registration attached to it. He gave the best descriptions he could, but as far as he has ever been able to determine, Keith and the two men who were with him were never found. What stays with him, what has always stayed with him, is the question of intention. This was not a robbery. A robbery would have been simpler. A robbery would not have required fake listings, prearranged coordination, a darkened house, multiple men waiting inside, or tape being readied in the dark. Whatever those men intended that night went far beyond taking his wallet. And when he lets his mind follow that thought to its logical end, he pulls himself back quickly. Because the answer to that question is not something a person wants to sit with for long. He is here to tell this story. And he says that fact alone, that simple, plain fact, is something he does not take for granted. 3 stories. 3 different people. 3 very different moments in their lives. And one common thread running through all of them, the willingness of certain dangerous people to hide behind ordinary things. A housing ad. A cleaning service. A classified listing for a used couch. Things that are supposed to be convenient and harmless and routine. Please, always trust the quiet voice that says something does not feel quite right. It is worth listening to. It has always been worth listening to. If any of these stories stayed with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone you care about, a daughter, a friend, a neighbor. These are the kinds of stories that genuinely matter to know. And if you have had your own experience with a situation that turned out to be far less safe than it appeared at first, we would really love to hear from you in the comments. Your story might be the one that protects someone else. Thank you so much for spending this time with us tonight. We will see you in the next one.